what is metaphysics? When most people hear this term, they think of a lot of new agey stuff like crystals, chakras, essential oils, yoga, tarot cards, astrology, patchouli oil, and I don't know, free range organic meditation or something. Anyway, it may be surprising for some of you to learn that metaphysics is actually the name of a very important field in philosophy. So what is metaphysics and what in the world does it have to do with Christianity? Well, these are actually really important questions because metaphysics is an area that touches on some of the most fundamental elements of the Christian faith. The definition has changed over time because more and more areas of study have been added to what philosophers now consider metaphysics. And rather than giving a precise definition, it's now easier to point to some of the questions metaphysics seeks to answer. It's kind of like going out to a forest and instead of defining what a tree is, just pointing to a lot of examples of trees and allowing people to see by pointing to trees what you mean. All right, so a few examples of the questions in metaphysics. Number one, is there a first cause? And if so, what is it? Well, clearly Christians have a vested interest in this question since it's a doctrine of the faith that God is the first cause of all creation. And obviously, if there is no first cause, then God can't be the first cause. Another question is, do we have free will? Are our choices causally determined by prior conditions? Both Christians and non-Christian thinkers have been wrestling with this question for thousands of years because without free will, it's really difficult to see how humans can truly be held morally responsible for their actions. And since it's a doctrine in Christianity that sinners are held morally responsible for their actions, we do have an interest in answering this question. Another question in metaphysics is, are there any unchanging truths? What truths depend on other truths, and what truths cannot possibly be other than what they are? Well, the Bible declares that God does not change. Right? That's a truth affirmed by Christianity. And in the context of that verse, it means that God is essentially morally perfect. But if there are no unchanging truths, then it's not true that God is essentially morally perfect. So which is it? Again, Christians have an interest in answering this question. Another question in metaphysics is, what are space and time? Christians maintain that God is in some sense everywhere and eternal. But what does that mean if we don't know what space and time even are, much less understand how God relates to them? And if it's unclear how God can relate to space and time, then it's also kind of unclear how he can care for us and love us, since we exist in space and time. Another question is, how do things which change maintain their identity over time? Christians believe that the same person who was a sinner may accept Christ, that they can be saved of their sin and enjoy eternity with God. But some philosophers say that there is no self which maintains identity over time, that we're really just collections of atoms which change every time an atom is gained or lost or rearranged. So answering this question is important for showing that the same person who is lost without Jesus may be saved and restored in Jesus. Another question in metaphysics is the physical universe all there is? Of course, for theists generally, and Christians in particular, the physical universe is not all there is. So if it turns out that the late Carl Sagan was right, he said that the cosmos is all that is or was or ever will be, then Christianity is false. So the intellectually responsible Christian will seek to show that there are good reasons for thinking that the physical universe is not all there is. And another question in metaphysics is, are the objective morals that we seem to want to affirm, are they real? In other words, Is it true that some things are good or bad, right or wrong, independent of our individual or collective opinions? If so, what's the best explanation for these objective morals? If they're just illusions of consciousness or they're human inventions that we create to bring about certain behaviors, then there are no morals which are objectively true. And that includes commands like love your neighbor as yourself. As you can see, metaphysics isn't just a curious and esoteric subject reserved for out-of-touch ivory tower scholars. It's an area of thought which reaches to the very core of Christianity. And if we want our faith to be seen as a rationally viable option in our ever more anti-Jesus culture, then we must interact with contemporary metaphysics and offer rebuttals where it purports to undermine Christian claims. By way of historical example, in the first half of the 1900s, there was a view that became wildly popular, especially in philosophy and science. It was called verificationism. And according to this view, the only things which could be said to have any meaning at all were those things which could be verified by our five senses. So anything that was not verifiable by our five senses was meaningless on this view. Of course, this would immediately do away with many things that Christians take to be true, such as the existence of God or the soul or angels or even love. It would also mean that historical claims like the resurrection of Jesus were meaningless, since there's no way to verify what actually happened with our five senses. However, philosophers were able to expose the powerlessness of this view by noting that it failed its own test. The verificationists claim that only that which can be verified by the senses is meaningful. That claim could not itself be verified by the five senses. And with the fall of verificationism came a renewed interest in metaphysical questions, which itself led to a great revival in Christian scholarship over the last 70 years. In other words, thank God for metaphysics. In my own life, exploring answers to these questions has yielded profound appreciation for God and the way our universe and our conscious experiences actually serve to magnify His greatness. And for those of you who are seeking a greater understanding of God, yourselves, and the world around us, I highly encourage you to explore the endlessly fascinating and important world of metaphysics, especially the amazing work done in this field by Christian philosophers and theologians. Have a great week.